Well, it cleared off today. We've been having some pretty torrential rains here since September. It cleared off today and was pretty nice outside, but it was cold. I did get a couple things done outside, but it was cold. So I came in here in the basement, started puttering around, and I was just going to putter around in here for a little bit and go outside and do some more work out there. But every time I went outside, I turned around, came back in, and said it's too damn cold out there. So maybe I'll get acclimatized here and be able to get outside and get some stuff done. Now if I just run machinery and work, and that'd be fine, but I need to do some mechanical work, and that takes fingers and stuff, and it's just too cold to have bare fingers outside. Anyway, I'm making progress on getting some of my tools caught up, worked on, and back running and stuff that I've been neglecting for years. I got the drum sander fixed and working pretty good, and then I put new caster wheels on my 10-inch radial arm saw, and then I put a new table on the 12-inch radial arm saw and cleaned it up and got it fixed up and working good. So now it's time to tackle this thing. This is a Grizzly G1033 20-inch planer, and there really wasn't anything wrong with it, except I wanted to change the cutter heads from a regular knife head to one of those spiral head carbide cutter heads. This thing has planed a lot of wood, and it worked great for that, except for a lot of the stuff I do, I want to be interior and finish wood, and most everything we get has knots and swirls and stuff like that in it, so it winds up having tear out and stuff on the wood. And these spiral head planer cutters are supposed to be able to cut without making near so much tear out. So I bought one of those spiral head cutters to modify this machine with. Well, and then I screwed up, because that main cutter head sticks through the other side of the machine. There's a bearing there in the casting on the other side of the machine, and then there's a big pulley there, and that comes off the motors, and that drives the planer head. And then it comes through this gearbox, transmission box, basically. It's got a bearing here and a seal here, and then it's got different gears in here for setting the speeds for the feed rollers. So there's two speeds for the feed rollers. I forget exactly what they are, 16 feet per minute and 12 feet per minute or something like that, or maybe it's 20 feet per minute, I can't remember. Anyway, this is a transmission for that. This mounts up here underneath this corner right here. Well, I got the bearing to come out that side, or the shaft to come out that side with the bearing on it, and this came off. But looking in the parts book, it looked like the bearing seated right in here, and so this should just slide right off the bearing. Now, I wasn't worried about taking the bearings off the cutter head, because I got all new bearings for everything. So anyway, I started to pull this off. Well, there's a boss on here, and there's a seal on here for the shaft, and the size of the seal, the outside diameter of the seal, is smaller than the OD of the bearing. So I wound up breaking this, and I tried patching it up. I tried brazing it up. This is cast iron, and it's pretty heavy. So I tried brazing that up, and that just didn't work. So I went to Grizzly and ordered a new one. Well, it was back ordered for about 3 years. Well, I finally got it last year, and then I've been busy with other things, and I didn't have time to fool with it. But I want to get this thing moving and get it out of here. I don't know whether I'm going to keep it or where I'm going to sell it, because I bought a 24-inch planer last year. And two reasons I bought the 24-inch planer. One, this one wasn't working, and I had a lot of wood that I wanted to get planed. And two, this one, even though it's a pretty good planer and a 20-inch planer, it's just not heavy duty enough for what I do. 20 inches is plenty wide enough, but the power on it is just not quite enough for what I want to do. And the feed rollers just won't feed some of the stuff through that I want to feed through. So anyway, I decided to get a bigger planer. So anyway, this casting broke, and everything has been sitting here now for 3 or 4 years without being put together, and so I'm going to get it put back together and get it working. Well, I've been puttering around with that today, so I'll show you what I was doing today. Well, these are some parts. These are the feed roller. This is a in-feed roller and the out-feed roller, and they're a little bit rusty, so I got to clean those up. This is the chip breaker. This goes in on top, keeps the chips from, breaks the chips up and gets them out. Well, here's the new cutter head. You see it's got multiple carbide bits on it, and it runs in a spiral. Now I know a spiral works because a lot of times when I had stuff that had figure on it with just the straight blades on it, if I run it through at an angle, that would help keep it from tear out as much. Of course, keeping the blades really sharp helped too. And I've sharpened the blades up once on the other cutter head, but they were starting to get dull again and needed to be sharpened again. That's why I decided to go ahead and put this spiral cutter on there. I'd had it for several years, but I didn't put it on because the other one was working fine. But as the blades got dull on it, rather than sharpen the blades again, I decided I'd put this in. Wouldn't have been a big deal if I hadn't have screwed up and broke it. Well, here's what I did today. This is that gearbox, and this is the new one that came. And I got it together. I got the new bearing and the seal in there, and then I had a little bit of trouble getting these other shafts in because they have bearing points and shafts that go in both to this faceplate on here and down in. There's cast bosses in there in the box itself. And then there was a couple locating pins, 2 dowel pins that go in here. They were in the old casting box. I tried putting some heat on it here, but I couldn't get them to move, so I took it down to the shop, got the acetylene torch out on it and heated that up red hot, and that got the pins loose enough where I could pull them out with a pair of pliers, and then I put them in this one and got everything back together. So this is the transmission, this is the shifter here. It moves the gear back and forth in there to shift the speeds. So this is all back together now. New bearing and seal on there, new bearing, sealed bearing on this end. Now I got to put it on the machine. Seems like I took these feed rollers out before I took this cutter head out, and it made it a lot easier to get the cutter head out, but I can't remember. I got to figure that out. But anyway, I've got to clean everything up before I go any farther. I've got to get that machine, the base and everything out where I can get to it. I just moved everything and tried to move it by hand, and it's too damn heavy for me to move, so I'm going to have to get a sling in here and pick it up, a hoist and pick it up and put it on the cart for it, the little roll around dolly for it, so I can move it around and then start getting everything cleaned up and get it back together. Anyway, that's a start. I'm happy with that, and this came bare, and I happen to have some green powder coat. I forget what it was called. It's kind of a hammer tone stuff, and that matches that Grizzly pretty doggone close. I suppose somebody with a better eye than me could see a difference in it, but I can see a difference in it because there's more hammer tone in this than what there is in the powder coat that I put on, but it's pretty doggone close. I'm pretty tickled with the way that turned out. So anyway, yeah, now the next step is to get everything all cleaned up and get this thing back together and get it running again. Actually, I may want to use it once I get it together and get this one going, and then maybe I can get those boards fixed up for finishing that rake on the cabin, and Judy can paint them. She's been wanting to do that. I've been working on this G1033 Grizzly 20-inch planer for the last couple days. I got the gearbox transmission assembly back together with the new spiral head cutter head mounted up to that, and I had a whole bunch of the other parts and stuff for it, the gear train that drives the in-feed and out-feed rollers and all the other parts and pieces and stuff over there, and they were kind of oily and sawdusty and stuff like that. So I put a little tub and put some paint thinner in it and put those pieces, nuts and bolts and parts and pieces, in the paint thinner, let them soak for a while and scrubbed them off. Well, the next thing to do is to get this machine itself, the main body of it, cleaned up, and I had it sitting down flat on the ground, and it was just too damn heavy for me to move. I used to be able to move that around, but it's too heavy for me now. Even with all of the cutter head and the in-feed and out-feed rollers and all the rest of the periphery taken off of it, just that main body is too heavy for me to move. So I needed to put the roll around underneath it. Well, to do that, I needed to pick it up high enough to get the roller under it. I got a strap wrapped around the body of the tool there, and then I got another strap and put up on my timber up there, and I was pretty sure that timber would hold. That's 14 inches deep and 12 inches wide, so I figured that was strong enough to hold. And I got a little come along, hoisted that thing up in the air, and got the cart underneath it, the roller underneath it. So now I can take that stuff apart, and I won't need that come along up here anymore, or those straps up here anymore, so I can get those taken apart, taken back down to the hangar, where I'll know where they're at when I need them the next time. Well, that looks 100% better. A whole lot of, well, some dust from the belts and some from my anti-slip belt stuff. Dust and sawdust and stuff on there. And then I've sprayed this down with corrosion block, and so it's got an oily coat on it, a greasy coat on it, as well as dust, sawdust and stuff from over the years. So it's coming clean. Well, this is what I really wanted to get cleaned up. This is the hole for the bearing here for the cutter head. The bearing cutter head goes through here, bearing comes through here, then there's a sheave that fits on that, a pulley that fits on that, on this side, and of course the belts go around. And then the transmission or the gearbox that I just put together goes over there on the other end. And then the feed rollers go in these pockets right here. Well, I've put a piece of MDF in there on top of the bed. This is where the bearing goes on the drive end of the cutter head. And here's the cutter head down here. This is the bearing that goes in that hole right there. I put a piece of MDF down on the table, on the movable table, and set that cutter head on there for now. But I'm going to use the table to raise the cutter head up to get it lined up with this hole right here and push that bearing in. I've got the transmission, the gearbox down on the other end's got to go up in a slot over there. What I think I'm going to do is stick it outside overnight, because it's 25 degrees out there now and it's supposed to get down to about 15 or 16 tonight, something like that, so it's going to be pretty cold. Actually, the next few days it's supposed to drop down to about 0 in the single digits anyway. If I put that thing outside and let that bearing get really cold, and then take my heat gun and heat up this housing here, this head, then maybe I can get that bearing to slide right in there without too much difficulty. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to go ahead and take that cutter head and stick it outside, let it sit overnight and get good and cold soaked. Then we'll work on that tomorrow, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that cutter head in there first before I fool with any of the rest of that stuff. I'm going to see what I can do about getting that cutter head put in there. I took the cutter head outside last night and let it sit outside. It got down to around 20 degrees or so, so it's pretty well cold soaked. I could wait until tomorrow to do it, because it's supposed to get down to 6 degrees or so tonight. I don't know whether that would make enough difference on it though in shrinking that down or not. I had this is a ceramic heater. I had it set up for corrosion control on the tool here when I brought it in, but when I had it out in the basement, I put it in and covered it up in here to kind of keep some heat in there, to keep moisture from condensing on the steel when it got cold. I put it in here last night, and I've had it up against this all night long, covered up. That's just a welding blanket. It's not a thermal blanket or insulation or anything. It's just a welding blanket, but it helped hold the heat in there. So anyway, that's warmed up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and get my heat gun and put it in there and see if I can raise the temperature of that up even more. I got the heat gun sitting on there. I'll let that blow on there for a while and see if I can raise the temperature of that metal up even more than what it is. Temperature in here in the basement is about 60 degrees, a little less than 60 degrees. Outside it's 20 degrees. And I don't know what the temperature was of that metal there from having that heater on it all night, but it was above room temperature, so it was warm to the touch, so that was good. And we'll see if we can't get it a little warmer. Well, I let that heat gun run on that case there for a little while, and it got warmed up. It probably wouldn't hurt to let it run on there a little while longer, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try now. I put this crank on here, put that MDF board down there so I can just crank this thing up into position. I don't have to lift it and try to hold it. This piece here fits right up in this pocket right here. Alright, the thing is home. Alright, that cutter head's in. That went pretty good, I'd say. Didn't slip right in exactly, but it went right in. There it is. Been a long time coming, but it's finally there. Well, now I can start putting the rest of it back in. Try to figure out how to do it. I've got a pulley to put on this side that the V-belts go on. That drives this. And then the feed rollers and the in-feed and out-feed rollers, they need to be cleaned up. They're rusty and they're also impregnated with sawdust and stuff in them. So I need to get those cleaned up before I put them on there. And then figure out how the pressure plate and the chip breaker go in there. The chip breaker's not too much of a problem, but the pressure plate is a little complex. But that's the main thing. That was the big chore, is getting that in there. That is pretty good. And I would have got this done a lot sooner if I hadn't have busted that gearbox case there just in a fit of stupidity. And it took me almost 2 years to get a new one, almost 3 years to get a new one from Grizzly. So anyway, there it is.